Hello and welcome to the Energy Connect studio at Gastech 2024 in Houston. I'm delighted to have sitting next to me in the studio today the Honorable Mark Menezes, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the United States Energy Association. Thank you, sir, for joining us today.
Jaron, it's a pleasure for me to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And to start off, how is the USEA helping develop the energy infrastructure, not just for the US, but around the world?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the United States Energy Association, we actually partner with the U.S. governmental agencies, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the State Department, Department of Energy, and other agencies, and we help carry out the public policy of bringing access to energy in the developing countries, and around the world. And of course, we also work in the United States, as you had mentioned. And of course, when you're here at Gastech, you're reminded of the global nature, of course, of energy systems, how they're interrelated, and how for us to solve the climate emission issue, you need to make sure that the energy infrastructure that you're putting in today, particularly in the developing countries where populations will be increasing, you want to try to have the energy infrastructure in place that will help lower the emissions as their populations rise. And so we're involved in that. We're involved in the countries in Africa, in the Southeast Asia, in India, in Eastern Europe, throughout the world where the energy infrastructure is important for generation, like for electricity. It's also important, though, for the interconnection. Right, so we spend as much time with electrical grids, in addition to trying to bring different sources of energy to regions of the country, to the world that still, are without access to clean energy. And we have 8 billion people in the world, and still 2.1 billion do not have access to clean cooking. Still use firewood. And with it brings, all the health problems, throughout those regions of the world. We still have 685 million people in the world without electricity. So those are the problems. We try to bring some common sense solutions, and that's what USEA really is all about.
Now, overcoming a challenge of that scale also requires a lot of regulatory frameworks to be in place. How are you supporting with that?
Okay. You raise a very good point. One lesson that you learn when you're with USEA is that you may have the best technology, you may think you have the best solution, but unless you get local community support, you're not going to be successful, even if you build it, you help them build it, and you help them operate it. What we find is, much like here in the United States, you need to talk and visit with the communities to help develop solutions. You can't impose any particular technology on them. You can't impose any particular policy on them. You constantly have to achieve the goals of a just and sustainable energy transition. The issues, like in the U.S., energy has to be affordable, it has to be reliable, and it has to be sustainable. So we do a lot of capacity building to ensure that when you set up a regulatory regime and you get buy-in from all the stakeholders, the most successful projects are those where the locals accept it as their own, and they have the capacity to make sure that it can continue after USEA and other agencies and other stakeholders leave.
That's an excellent point, and that brings me to the opportunities as well as the challenges that you see arising out of this whole journey towards net zero, as the transition, as well as the decarbonization of the industry.
Right. Energy is key to everything we do. It's key, we can't forget that it's key for the developing countries to rise their standard of living. So it's a necessary element. And when we talk about bringing energy to the developing countries, we're not simply talking about a light bulb. That's insufficient. Today, everybody in the world really sees energy as a right because of the health effects and longevity of life, or economic prosperity, or at least getting out of endemic poverty. And so our approach is comprehensive. A success for this is not just, as I mentioned, bringing intermittent electricity or propane to take the place of dung or firewood within a home. You need to make sure that the entire supply chain is there. The interesting thing we found is you can bring propane, good natural gas, liquid, to towns and villages in developing countries. But you're asking them, and it's one thing to teach them how to use a propane or an electric stove, right? But you're changing generations of a lifestyle and a culture that has built up around going in the villages or going in the forest and getting firewood or dung. There's whole family and village cultures that you simply can't come up and say, well, here's a bunch of electric stoves, or here's some propane tanks, and expect them to go, well, this is just great, right? It is great, but it takes so much education and, as I mentioned, capacity building to really hope that these changes last.
Absolutely. And we are here at Gastech, which is the world's leading forum for natural gas and LNG. How do you see natural gas and LNG shaping the energy transition?
Well, all the studies show that natural gas and LNG is driving down actual global emissions. Certainly in the United States, the primary reason that the U.S. has led the world in actual emission reduction since 2005 is because our natural gas has been replacing coal for electricity production, and it complements renewables very well. So we have a lot of solar and wind. We're continuing to build solar and wind, but natural gas can complement that because it ramps up and down. So on LNG, we've noticed throughout the world, the story is the same. And what's interesting is last year, notwithstanding all of our efforts to reduce emissions, notwithstanding all of our efforts to develop and export natural gas globally, last year still was peak demand for coal and oil. Yeah. So we're still using oil where we could be using natural gas, say for electricity, and we're still seeing countries build coal plants for good reasons to bring energy, but for reasons that you can avoid by choosing to have natural gas. So the infrastructure development is important. We have really made great strides in being able to get natural gas transported to different parts of the world almost as rapidly as the oil market, the global oil markets. For now, we have a global trade of natural gas to where, as we say, if you have LNG on the water, it can really go anywhere, or it can be swapped out. So you're getting a very sophisticated trading system with that, and that facilitates a lot of the use of the natural gas. We saw when Russia invaded Ukraine and Europe needed natural gas, and we had a lot of vessels being cargoed to Asia, and was able to redirect or sell or swap. And so we were able to help Europe in their time of need, really, and still having adequate natural gas elsewhere. So it's a great product. It's driving down emissions globally. The challenge is always, getting the infrastructure built, but that's any energy infrastructure.
And finally, we are here at Gastech. What are your expectations from this event?
Well, my expectations were high when I came, and they've only really been exceeded. In that, it's the global nature and the interrelatedness of natural gas, all of the infrastructure, and the new technologies that are being developed. And so in addition to having roundtables from people all over the world where we can share our experience and we can learn from their experience, you have the exhibits of technologies that just simply walking through there, it literally is like brain candy because there are so many innovative technologies there, and there are experts that can help explain their technologies. And to me, that's really invaluable. I deal with policymakers all the time, and policymakers really like to understand how things can work because that will influence policy, and it typically results in a better policy because most policy succeeds if you get public-private partnerships in place because the governments, we've learned, really can't do everything to solve the energy needs, of the world.
Thank you so much, sir, for your brilliant insights and for the analysis and for being here in the studio with us.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, and we'll be back with more studio interviews from Gastech 2024 in Houston. In the meantime, you can get more comprehensive coverage from the energy industry at energyconnect.com. Stay tuned.